Welcome to Saints on Cinema. I am Tim Wild, and with me is Josh Edlow.
Hello, I'm here again in the Rocky Room. Looking forward to talking about our top 7 tonight.
And tonight's not tonight, doesn't matter when it is, but today, no, not today, because it's not daytime. But in this episode, we'll be reviewing our top 7 favorite sports movies. Now, I'm just going to say right here that I have not seen as many sports movies as Josh has because he's a much bigger sports fan than I am. I like sports movies, and there are specific things I was looking for in my movies for my selections, but I'm not going to say I've probably seen all of his, and a lot of the messages we had on Facebook and other people's recommendations, a lot of those I haven't even seen. And there are some movies that I should have seen that I am embarrassed that I have not yet seen. Several of them are on my shelves that I still have to go back and watch.
You're telling me that you have movies on your shelf, I'm assuming for an extended period of time, that you haven't actually watched?
Yes, I would say I have a good 20-30 movies on my 400 that I've not seen.
Wow. Okay. All right.
But just to clarify, when we were talking about sports movies, there were certain things that I was looking for, and I wanted to just kind of explain that before we get to our list. And Josh, you can explain what you were looking for, but what I was going for in things that I love, there are different themes and aspects of a sports movie that I look for. One of them is that rally moment. There has to be that moment where they're in their down moment, and then they have to like get all energized. They have a pep talk in the locker room, or just some turn or something motivates them to turn around and step it up and become victorious. And being victorious in a good sports movie doesn't always mean that you win, but there has to be that time when you rally. That was a big deal. Another factor is there has to be, not has to be, I'm not saying this is a checklist, but these are just things that are factors in a sports movie that I enjoy. Another one is the zero to hero aspect. A lot of my favorite sports movies, they have the underdog scenario where you have a team or a competitor or a character who is not likely to win or brand new to a sport or whatever, who ends up becoming victorious either against a specific foe or winning the whole thing. The other one has to be fun involvement with the sport itself. Some sports movies don't have very much to do with the actual sport. The ones I picked, the sport itself is a big aspect of the movie. Colorful characters is a plus. I enjoy movies that aren't just, they're all a bunch of baseball players or basketball players that go into a turn with like a coach, but it has to, I like colorful characters, not just a solid team of characters that are about pretty much the same with different names, slightly different personalities, but it's just about a team doing something. Resolved relationships or overcoming or differences between the characters. I like movies that have characters that have issues with each other, or they have dysfunctionality or have problems that they're trying to overcome. That's a big factor in a good sports movie to me. And I love the whole aspect of a humbled bad guy. You always have the bad guy team and they win, and then it seems like they're going to win, and usually the main team or character defeats them. But there's always that moment where the bad guy hands the trophy over, or they come and shake their hands and say good job or whatever, which seems totally out of character. A lot of that is just Hollywood and it's ridiculous, but it's what makes a really good sports movie to me. So that's kind of some of the stuff I was looking for and thinking about in some of my favorite sports movies.
I had a very specific idea of what I was looking for with my sports movies, and that ended up being expanded a little bit by some of the comments that we got on our Facebook page. It's clear that a lot of our Facebook fans are huge sports movie fans. We got a lot of different lists, a lot of different movies, and there were movies on there that I was surprised that people even considered a sports movie. In fact, one in particular I'll mention here is Peter Brazier mentioned A Knight's Tale. And I said, wait a minute, I don't know if that's really a sports movie. And he said, well, in those times, that was the biggest sport, Well, I guess you could technically say that is a sports movie. I don't know if I necessarily consider it a sports movie, but it helped me kind of expand my horizons. And you'll see at least one or two of my movies, well, one in particular, where I wasn't necessarily considering it a sports movie, but I'm glad that I did because I think it deserves to be on the top of my list. And another thing I would say is that this one was even harder for me to limit to 7 than the underrated comedies one that we did, because like you said, I love sports movies. I've played sports my whole life. I watch sports. I'm a huge basketball fan. And so it was really hard for me to just kind of narrow that field to just 7, because there are so many movies you could put on the list. And if you told me that you had a different movie on the list, I'd say, hey, you're totally justified in putting that on your list. So
can I just say, with Knight's Tale, that any movie that has "We Will Rock You" in the opening credit sequence counts as a sports movie. I don't care what it's about.
Good point. Good point. The other thing I did is I wanted to make sure that I had a wide genre of different sports in the movies. I have numerous basketball movies that I love that I think you could argue is one of the best. There's one or more than one football movie. And so, like I said, I think that this is a situation where this list could be 20 movies and they all deserve some recognition. I limited it to 7, and I had specific reasons for each one. I'll just go ahead and dive into my list, all right? So number 7, and my number 7 changed even just the last 5 minutes, okay? So my number 7 is A League of Their Own. And the reason I picked A League of Their Own, this is the one with Gina Davis, Madonna, Rosie O'Donnell, about the American women's baseball team, or a baseball league that started during World War II. Now, the specific reason why I say this is one of my favorite sports movies, I just in the last year have considered this one of my favorite sports movies. And the reason is because I have 2 daughters. And I watch a lot of sports movies. I watch some of them probably monthly because I just love them so much. And my daughters actually came to me and said, can we watch a movie that has girls in it? And I put A League of Their Own on. And I thought it had a great message for any little girl out there that they can play sports and be just as good as the men. And really, I feel like, especially my oldest daughter, it kind of opened her horizons to that women, that sports is not just a male-dominated thing anymore, and that they can also participate and be just as good, and everything that they do is just as relevant. The scene where they see that they were put into the Baseball Hall of Fame, I could see my daughter's eyes light up. So that's why that's kind of become one of my favorites. So that's number 7. Number 6. Oh, go ahead.
I say I love that movie, and I think it was groundbreaking in some of the topics that it hit, especially women athleticism. I agree with that.
And also, it has one of the most famous lines in any sports movie: "There's no crying in baseball." And that whole scene with Tom Hanks ripping that woman for missing the cutoff man, and her crying and him freaking out, was just classic. And it's an iconic. It's an iconic sports movie moment. So
I still remember from the mission when you gave a training as a zone leader, quoting that and talking about how there's no crying on missions, there's no crying in baseball, and talking about how missions are hard, and if they weren't hard, then anyone would do it. And I totally still remember that training. It was hilarious. I was like, that's awesome.
That I've used that. I've coached different sports now. And even in just life, I've used that moment. I think that moment in the movie between Tom Hanks and Gina Davis, when she's quitting and she says it just got too hard, and he says it's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, anybody would do it, and the hard's what makes it great. That scene resonated with me so much, and I've actually thought about that when times have gotten hard in my own life. And particularly when I went to law school, there were many times where I played Tom Hanks in my head. Thinking about that not everybody can do it. And that's why what I'm doing is so special. And so, like I said, great movie. It resonates with me, especially now that I have daughters. So that's my number 7. Number 6, The Sandlot. Now, this is one that I wouldn't have put on my list if it wasn't for that Facebook comment, because I don't know if this is necessarily a movie about sports as much as it is about a coming of age story of a young man, a young man who moved into a new area and didn't have friends, and then befriending him and getting into the pickle with the dog and losing the baseball. But the baseball does, I mean, it's integral to the story. You can't have the story without the Sandlot and baseball being a part of it. I don't know of anybody who's seen the movie and didn't like it. What do you think about that? Do you think that deserves to be a sports movie?
No, and that's the thing. That's one of the two that were very common on there. Now, let me say that's one of my all-time favorite movies, and I've watched that movie 100 times. But to me, it's not a sports movie. It's a movie about a bunch of kids who are playing a sport, but everything about that movie is about the characters, and it doesn't have anything, even an overall game or anything. Yeah, it has the pickle with the dog and everything, but there's no real. There's nothing with the sport. I mean, the sport is the environment that they're in, but to me, it had nothing to do with it. There weren't plays, there weren't the relationships and the friendship between Benny and what's the kid's name, Smalls. You know, I mean, that's what sells it, and a lot of people can relate to a lot of the different aspects of each of the characters and all the kids. But there was no rivalry, there was no competition, there was barely even the game. They were playing there, but all the stuff was about, you know, Benny hit that ball and broke it. Benny broke the baseball, so they had to go round up Nichols, and then they lost the other ball, the Babe Ruth ball, over the fence, and so everything was about stuff while they were playing baseball, but nothing to do with baseball itself, except for the one game halfway through it where they played the preppy kids.
But one thing about that movie I think that's important with sports is how sports can connect us, right? I mean, the whole reason why Benny and Smalls have become friends is because of baseball. I mean, the whole point at the end of the movie is that they're still friends. He's now a commentator for I think it was with the Dodgers, right? He's the commentator with the Dodgers, and Benny is now playing on the Dodgers, and they're still best friends. And that it's true. I still see, you know, I still live in the same town that I went to high school in, and I still see people who are on my basketball team, and we're connected because we were on the high school basketball team together. So, you know, sports connects people in a way. So I think it does count as a sports movie. And really, I was with you up until we posted on Facebook. And when I saw that, I said, you know what, this really is a sports movie. I'm going to include it on my list. So that was my number 6. Now, number 5, definitely a sports movie. One of my favorites, Happy Gilmore. Happy Gilmore, Adam Sandler. This is, I'm not sure. I would say this is probably my favorite Adam Sandler movie. I always go back and forth between that and Billy Madison. But Happy Gilmore, I'm sure we all know the premise. He's a failed hockey player who stumbles upon realizing that he has an incredibly long drive in golf, and Carl Weathers, who's Chubbs Peterson, the golf pro at the local driving range, finds him and tries to teach him the game, and he ends up on the pro tour. And he's playing against Christopher McDonald, who plays Shooter McGavin, who is one of the funniest villains. Anytime he's in a movie as the villain, I love it. He's so great as playing that comedic villain. And so the hilariousness that ensues from that movie is just, it's a classic, great comedy. And so what do you think of that one?
Don't yell at me. I've never sat and watched the whole movie. I've seen most of it on a bus ride once. I've seen clips of it, but as much as I used to love Adam Sandler when I was younger, that movie just for some reason I just had no interest in it. Nothing was appealing about the premise, about the sport, about the characters, about the actors, other than it was Adam Sandler. But I watched it on a bus ride going to Gettysburg on a school trip in Washington, D.C., and I could have cared less.
I cannot believe what I just heard out of your mouth. You have not seen Happy Gilmore? How can you possibly, how can you be a saint on cinema and not seen Happy Gilmore? That is one of the best comedies, sports comedy or just pure comedy of all time. you need to stop whatever you're doing. As soon as we're done with this, you need to go and get Happy Gilmore and watch it immediately. So
I would even say that's not even one on my shelf as a I need to get around to it list or movie. It's just I've never cared. I'll
right,
I will watch it.
I am making a call to anybody who subscribes to our YouTube or anybody on our Facebook page. Everybody needs to inundate our comments, forcing Tim to see Happy Gilmore and give us his review. This is a clear confessional that should have been dealt with his bishop a long time ago. So let's get this fixed, okay? There is a repentance process for you, and it starts with
first confession of sin. I already did that. All right. Okay. I'll concede. I will watch it. I'll do it.
Okay. So those three there, I was not sure the order. I was not sure what was going to go on and what was not, but these 1 through 4, their calling election was made sure on my list. Okay. So let's start with number 4, which was Hoosiers. Hoosiers is my favorite basketball movie of all time. I can't believe it's not on your list, but that's neither here nor there. I can understand if you've never been involved in sports or been a big sports fan. I can understand why it wouldn't necessarily appeal to you. But as someone who has played on basketball teams and has had coaches like that, I love that movie. It's my favorite basketball movie. This is a movie where Gene Hackman plays a disgraced college basketball coach named Norman Dale, who gets a second shot at coaching by joining a small high school in Indiana with a very, very small basketball team. And he faces a lot of criticism from the small town folks there for his hot temper and the unconventional hire of an assistant coach who's the town drunk, who also happens to be a father of one of the players, who's played by Dennis Hopper, who does a fantastic job in the role. So this is based on a true story that happened in Indiana. And he actually leads the small town team to the state championship. And so if you haven't seen the movie and you're a fan of basketball, I highly recommend it. It's just a fantastic movie, strictly from a sports perspective.
I absolutely agree. Now, it's not on my list, like you said, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's a fantastic drama of a basketball team, and we served in Indiana. We've been to many of those places, and we've kind of had a feel for those people and the small town. We kind of got to experience that a little bit with kind of where they were coming from. I love the movie. I love Gene Hackman. I love his performance in that movie, and I love some of the lines. I can't quote them or I can't recite them. It is on my shelf, but the thing is, it's all of the things I mentioned, that list of the things that I look for, it had some of those very strongly. It did have them being the underdog and rising up with it, and no one thought they could. It did have them with a good coach. It had the good pep speech and everything. It just felt like there's something missing from it. For maybe it was just an entertainment thing, even though there's some funny stuff in that too. I don't know. It was on my list. It was on my list of honorable mentions. I had it on the list and I took it off. But it's a great movie. I'm not discrediting it. There's other things that I thought were more well-rounded for me as what I look for in a sports movie. Yeah, I love it. It's a great movie.
I don't want to say I'm anywhere near as good as Norman Dale from Hoosiers, but I try to mimic what he does there and the things that he teaches. And also the other thing that he does is when in their first practice, and he says, this is a team. You are 5 individual players playing as one unit. That's such a great vision, the way he described it. I'm not doing it justice. So just a fantastic movie from just a pure sports perspective. But I could totally understand it is slow, and you have to have an affinity for sports, especially an affinity for basketball, to truly appreciate that movie for what it really is.
My number 7, I chose Blades of Glory. And this is
okay, hold on. That I like that movie so much. I really do. Like, Will Ferrell is one of my favorite comedians, and John Heder too. I love him. But top 7. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right. Again, going back to what I was looking for, it is a sport. figure skating. It's the thing is about it. It does have the full arc that I look for, that I enjoy in a sports movie. It has a lot of crazy antics and everything. It has a lot of obviously very colorful characters. But you have the moment where they start with them being the underdogs, even though they were both champions and medal winners in the past. Now they are trying the sport from doing a couples figure skating, and that's just a dynamic that they've never tried before, and it's ridiculous to think of two men trying to do those same maneuvers that that regular couples usually do. So it starts them off at ground zero like a good sports movie does. They do have to learn how to deal with each other, get along with each other, and listen to the coach. Very much not as dramatic as Hoosiers and the obedience and the things that they learn in a more serious way. But it did have all that, and it did overcome their struggles and their individual issues that they had. I think it's a fantastic sports movie, and there are some of the funniest moments in that from both of their careers. I think everyone should watch and enjoy if they haven't. I know a lot of people that have seen it and just thought it was okay. A lot of people who haven't seen it, that I always tell them you need to go watch it.
I understand Blades of Glory is a good movie. I don't think it's Will Ferrell's best performance, even in a sports movie that he's done. Like I said, Talladega Nights is one that I just love. But anyway, okay, that's number 7. I'm
that's number 7.
I'm coming
all right.
to acceptance. So
okay, number 6, Major League 2. Now, Major League 2 was on your list of top underrated comedies. But the thing is the Major League movies they capture everything that I love. They have a team. They have very different, diverse characters. They have a lot of things they have to work out as a team and individually to overcome. They have the moment where they have to rally. They have to come back and win. They have a specific team that they struggle playing against. They don't have the humility and the villain moment, but that's okay. Major League 2, I think, it has a lot more of the dynamic. I enjoy the all of them getting behind everything to overcome all their obstacles. I like the addition of the little Chinese guy that they have. I don't know. It's just a great movie. It has a lot of laughs, but it has a lot of it's just, I enjoy it because Major League 2 has the same flavor as the first movie, but it's all different situation now, and everyone, they've had their victories, but now they're kind of relaxed and they have to overcome that. And there's a little more personalization in them and what they have to overcome than there was in the first one. I think it's a little more fulfilling, the whole arc overall of the story.
I like it a lot. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's certainly one worth mentioning. The Major League series in general is such a great comedy for baseball. And I agree, Major League 2, it seems to have it feels to me like they have a larger struggle in the second one, because now they've tasted fame and they've all kind of gone their separate ways, and now they suck for a different reason, and that is that they just can't figure out what it was that they had before. And overcoming that seems to be even more difficult than in the first one. So I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's a good one.
And it's a lot more gratifying to see them overcoming in the second one for some reason. It's just the whole thing just seems a lot more grander of an experience for them.
And they also have a dedicated villain. In the first one, they didn't have. I mean, they had the guy who was always hitting big home runs off of Charlie Sheen. But in this one, they actually had a player who was on their team, was a total jerk, and got traded to their rivals, and was the guy who he had to strike out at the end. So much better story there at the end as well.
And that's, and that was the same guy that was a catcher that had the rivalry with Charlie Sheen, and then also with Willie Mays Hayes, and when he came around to score last point. It was awesome. Number 5. Now, I don't know if this is on your list or if it's be a little higher up your list, but The Karate Kid. So I was torn if I wanted to mention the remake with Jaden Smith. I think in some ways, if we're looking at it as a sport, that movie in some ways is superior as far as the things that I'm looking for in a in a sports movie. But the original Karate Kid, if you take karate as a sport and you have the character trying to overcome his personal trials and everything and go into all the training and everything to achieve his goal, his personal development and everything, Ralph Macchio just does a really good job of coming out as this complete regular kid who is totally overwhelmed in this new town and getting bullied and beat up, and he has issues with his mother, he has issues with his love interest, and he has issues with her boyfriend who's kicking his butt all the time. And then the only person that he hits it off with is Mr. Miyagi, and everyone knows the story, but the magic of it is just where he does triumph because he accomplishes something himself. It doesn't, and it's all in that scene in the locker room at the very end before the last match where the Cobra Kai have broken his leg, hurt his leg. They didn't break his leg, but they take a lot of cheap shots to his wounded knee, and he has to convince Miyagi to do his little his little magic healing process that he does to get him to be able to stay in the fight. And the motive he has is so that he can be at one or be at peace for himself in his life, not so he can be victorious and win and know that he was better than them. I think that message and where he grows is I think that's what makes that movie just a really good sports movie, is what he himself does.
Well, I would tell you that there is absolutely no redeeming value at all to the Jaden Smith Karate Kid. And to say that anything about that movie, including the sports aspect, is better is complete blasphemy to me. And I think you deserve no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. So,
we will have a discussion about the Karate Kid series, including that one someday. But
yes, to answer your question, the Karate Kid is coming on my list for a little foreshadowing. So I'll save a lot of what I have to say when I talk about the movie. But I agree that is in my mind one of the best sports movies of all time, especially when you look at it in context and the fact that up until that time all the martial arts movies were Bruce Lee movies where they were real serious martial arts movies, and this is the first one where Mr. Miyagi seems like a guy that you could actually meet on the street, and he's a very understated mentor, but a fantastic mentor at the same time. I mean, I think that Mr. Miyagi is probably the most iconic mentor character of all time, and I think that Pat Morita plays it so well. One of my biggest regrets in life is that I'll never be able to actually meet Mr. Miyagi in person and get his autograph.
All right. So my number 4, Necessary Roughness. I love that movie, and not many people really even think about it when they think about sports movies. It's kind of become forgotten. But Necessary Roughness has everything that I love. That's the movie with what's his name? What's his name, Josh? The main guy. The guy from Quantum Leap.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but I know who you're talking about.
Well, now I gotta look. Oh. Scott Bakula, that's it. Scott Bakula. All right. So my number 7, my number 4. What number are we on 4? My number 4 is Necessary Roughness with Scott Bakula playing the head quarterback. A lot of big names in the cast, but we're not going to get into all that. But that has everything that I love about a good sports movie. It has a team. Again, very diverse team. They have a lot of different factors in their relationship working together. You have the hillbilly, you have the fat sumo guy, you have what's her name? Who's the model? Kathy Ireland. Yeah. So you have Kathy Ireland stepping in as the kicker, and then you have everyone, and they have to pull in. The cool thing about the movie, again, you have your rivalry. You have Flat Top, and that's the guy from the other college. The other university who just tears them up the first time they play. You have a lot of good scenes where you watch all of them kind of grow and progress and pull together as a team. And then you have the main character trying to compete, where he is now in his 30s playing with a bunch of mid-20 college-age kids who are in their prime physically. And so it's it's fun watching that dynamic and watching him trying to hang with them and become a leader with the team as well. What did you think of Necessary Roughness?
I like that movie a lot. I actually considered it as an underrated comedy as well. I don't think it got anywhere near my list of top 7, but it is definitely underrated, and I agree it is forgotten. And I like some of the interplay there as well. You have so many different stories going on in there. I mean, particularly Scott Bakula being an over the hill quarterback with potential that was never realized because of the death of his father. You have the coach who's trying to establish a merit-based system without scholarships. You have a dean who doesn't want this to succeed, the whole program to even succeed. You have them playing Ironman football, which is completely unheard of. And then you have comedy from Sinbad, which is always a good thing, particularly in 90s movies like that. Kathy Ireland's nice to look at, so that helps as well. There's so much comedy in this movie that makes it really great. I don't know if I would put it on, I don't think I'd put it anywhere near my top 7 all time, but I'm not discrediting in any way. I think that it is a great sports movie, and if you haven't seen it, it's certainly worth a watch.
I think one of the main things about it being on my list is the very end where everything does come together, that everything gets resolved, everything's taken care of. They do play their rival team. The flat top character is the other quarterback. He's determined to take down Blake, Scott Bakula's character, and after it's all over, they do the blitz play. They win, and then they do have the moment where he is the bad guy who's been a complete jerk the whole time. They got in bar fights and everything. Does come up and shake his hand, and everything's kind of cool. And I just love it. It has kind of everything I look for in a totally fictitious, ridiculous sports movie. So that's my number 4 was Necessary Roughness.